The sun had barely risen over London when the first stirrings of activity began at Adelaide Cottage. Inside the cozy royal residence, Prince William stood before a mirror, adjusting his ceremonial uniform with practiced precision. The deep navy, fabric adorned with golden braids and gleaming metals, caught the early morning light streaming through the windows. Each medal told a story of service, duty, and dedication to the crown. Kate emerged from their bedroom, her silhouette graceful, even in the simple robe she wore. Her hair was already styled in an elegant updo by her personal hairdresser, who had arrived before dawn to ensure everything was perfect. The Duchess moved with the calm confidence that had become her trademark over the years, but William could see the slight tension in her shoulders. Today was not just any royal event, it was history in the making. "The children are getting restless," Kate said softly, glancing toward the hallway where muffled voices could be heard. "George keeps asking if he remembered all the protocols." "Correctly." William smiled, remembering his own nervous energy before his first major royal ceremony. "He'll be fine. He's been practicing for weeks." The pride in his voice was unmistakable. Prince George, now growing into his role as future king, had shown remarkable composure during rehearsals, but the weight of such responsibility was heavy for someone so young. In the adjacent room, Princess Charlotte was having her hair braided by one of the staff members. She sat unusually still, which was remarkable for a child known for her spirited personality. Her dress, a beautiful creation in soft blue silk, hung nearby, waiting for the moment when she would transform from a playful princess into a picture of royal elegance. Prince Louis, the youngest of the three, was perhaps the most excited. He bounced on his bed, already dressed in his miniature version of formal wear, complete with tiny polished shoes that reflected the morning light. His enthusiasm was infectious, and even the usually serious royal protection officers found themselves smiling at his animated chatter about riding in the big cars and seeing all the people. The household staff moved through the cottage with quiet efficiency. Breakfast had been prepared hours earlier, simple, light fare that wouldn't cause any discomfort during the long ceremony ahead. Tea was served in the finest china, a tradition that brought a sense of normalcy to this extraordinary day. Kate's stylist arrived with the final accessories for her outfit. The sapphire jewelry set, a gift from the late Queen Elizabeth, sparkled brilliantly against the morning light. Each piece had been carefully selected to complement her ensemble while honoring royal tradition. The tiara, in particular, held special significance. It had been worn by previous generations of royal women during similarly momentous occasions. As the family gathered for a final breakfast together, the atmosphere was a unique blend of excitement and solemnity. William reviewed the day's schedule one more time, ensuring every detail was committed to memory. The timing had to be perfect. Any delay could affect the entire ceremony, watched by millions around the world. Outside, the sounds of London awakening to this historic day began to filter through the windows. Even from their private residence, they could hear the distant hum of crowds gathering along the route to Westminster Abbey. Street vendors were already calling out to early visitors, and the clip-clop of mounted police horses echoed through the morning air. George appeared in the doorway, his face serious beyond his years. "Father, what if I forget what I'm supposed to do?" His question carried the weight of generations of royal responsibility. William knelt to his son's eye level, placing gentle hands on the boy's shoulders. "You won't forget, George. But even if you do, remember that everyone there wants you to succeed. They're not watching to find fault. They're watching because they believe in what our family represents." Charlotte joined them, her dress now perfectly arranged, her hair adorned with a small tiara that made her eyes shine with wonder. "Will there really be thousands of people watching?" she asked, her voice mixing curiosity with a touch of nervousness. Kate smoothed Charlotte's hair affectionately. "Yes, darling. But remember what we practiced. Look straight ahead, smile when it feels natural, and remember that you're representing all the children in the Commonwealth who look up to you." The security briefing had been thorough but discreet. The route to Westminster Abbey would be lined with well-wishers, but every precaution had been taken to ensure the family's safety. The vehicles had been inspected multiple times. The drivers were among the most experienced in the royal fleet, and the protection officers had rehearsed every possible scenario. As the final minutes of preparation ticked by, each family member took a moment for personal reflection. This coronation was more than a ceremony. It was a passage into a new era, with new responsibilities and expectations. The children, in particular, would emerge from this day with a deeper understanding of their roles in the monarchy's future. The morning sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the cottage grounds. Soon the cars would arrive and their private family time would give way to the public spectacle that awaited. But for now, in these quiet moments, they remained simply a family, supporting each other before stepping into history. William checked his watch one final time. The meticulous planning of months would soon be put to the test. Every bow tie was straight, every shoe polished to perfection, every piece of jewelry positioned exactly as protocol demanded. The transformation from private family to public royalty was almost complete. The rumble of approaching engines announced the arrival of the royal convoy. Through the cottage windows, the family could see the impressive line of vehicles pulling up to their entrance. The lead car, a magnificent Rolls-Royce Phantom 6, gleamed like a black jewel in the morning sunlight. Behind it, additional vehicles carried security personnel, staff, and backup equipment, a mobile fortress designed to protect the most important family in Britain. Kate took a final look in the mirror, adjusting the diamond earrings that had belonged to Princess Diana. The weight of them felt significant not just physically but emotionally. Today, she would honor the memory of William's mother while creating new memories for their own children. Her reflection showed a woman transformed, no longer just a mother getting her children ready for an important day, but the Princess of Wales ready to play her part in a ceremony watched by billions. The protection officers entered with practiced discretion, their experienced eyes scanning the family and giving subtle nods of approval. Everything was in order. Chief Inspector Matthews, who had been with the family for years, approached William with quiet confidence. "Your Royal Highness, we're ready to proceed. The route is secure, crowds are well managed, and we're running precisely on schedule." William nodded, then turned to gather his family. This was the moment when their private mourning transformed into public duty. George straightened his shoulders, Charlotte smoothed her dress one final time, and Louis practically vibrated with excitement. The walk to the cars felt both endless and instantaneous. Kate held Louis's hand while William placed a reassuring hand on George's back. Charlotte walked independently, her chin raised with determination that reminded everyone watching of her great-grandmother, the late Queen Elizabeth II. As they stepped outside, the first cameras began clicking. Royal photographers, positioned at respectful distances, captured the family's emergence into the day that would define this generation of the monarchy. Kate's dress, an exquisite creation in ivory silk with delicate embroidery representing flowers from all nations of the Commonwealth, moved gracefully in the gentle breeze. The children handled the attention with remarkable poise. George's months of preparation showed in every step, while Charlotte waved naturally to the gathered staff who had lined up to see them off. Louis, true to his spirited nature, gave an enthusiastic wave that made even the stoic security personnel smile. William helped Kate into the primary vehicle, the interior of which was appointed with the finest materials Britain could offer. Soft leather seats, climate control set to the perfect temperature, and sound insulation that would allow for private conversation during the journey to Westminster Abbey. The children settled into their designated seats, with Louis between his parents where he could be easily managed if excitement overcame protocol. As the convoy began to move, the transformation of London became apparent. Streets that were normally busy with everyday traffic had been cleared and lined with barriers. British flags hung from every available point, creating rivers of red, white, and blue that stretched as far as the eye could see. The sight was breathtaking, a city that had dressed itself in celebration of this historic moment. The first crowds appeared as they left the immediate vicinity of their residence. People had been camping overnight in some locations, determined to secure the best viewing spots for the royal procession. Children perched on their parents' shoulders, Elderly couples shared folding chairs, and teenagers held up phones to capture every second of the royal family's passage. Kate pointed out the window to a group of children from a local school, all wearing matching blue uniforms and waving small British flags with infectious enthusiasm. "Look, Lewis, they're about your age," she said softly, and Lewis pressed his face to the window, waving back with genuine delight. The route had been carefully planned to maximize public viewing opportunities while maintaining security. They passed through neighborhoods that rarely saw royal visitors, where entire communities had come out to be part of this historic day. Garden parties had been organized in residential areas, with tables full of traditional British treats and decorations that had clearly taken weeks to prepare. George watched the crowds with growing amazement. "There are so many people," he murmured, and William could hear both wonder and the beginning of understanding in his son's voice. This was the moment when the abstract concept of the people we serve became real, personal, and immediate. Street. Musicians had positioned themselves at key points along the route, adding a soundtrack to the journey. Traditional British marches mixed with contemporary pieces, creating an atmosphere that was both timeless and thoroughly modern. The music seemed to energize the crowds, who sang along to familiar melodies and applauded spontaneously. Charlotte noticed a group of girl guides who had formed an honor guard outside their meeting hall. "They're just like my brownies group," she said, and Kate felt a surge of pride at her daughter's connection to the children watching their passage. These were the moments that made the monarchy relevant, when royal children could see themselves reflected in the lives of ordinary British children. The convoy moved with stately precision, neither rushing nor dawdling. The timing had been calculated to the minute, ensuring they would arrive at Westminster Abbey at exactly the moment when the ceremony could begin. Traffic lights had been synchronized and every intersection cleared well in advance. As they approached central London, the crowds grew denser and more diverse. International visitors mixed with local residents, creating a tapestry of languages, cultures, and traditions united in celebration of British monarchy. Street vendors sold commemorative items, and the air filled with the sounds of celebration from dozens of different nations. As the convoy entered the historic heart of London, the atmosphere intensified dramatically. The ancient streets, which had witnessed countless royal processions over the centuries, seemed to pulse with energy. Buildings that had stood for hundreds of years were draped in ceremonial bunting, their Georgian and Victorian facades creating a magnificent backdrop for this very modern royal family. The crowds here were different from those in the residential neighborhoods they had passed through. Earlier, these were people who had traveled from across the globe, many wearing the traditional dress of their home countries. Kate spotted a group of women in beautiful saris, their silk fabrics shimmering in the sunlight, standing next to a family in Scottish kilts. The Commonwealth was represented in living color along the route. Lewis had grown quieter as the magnitude of the event became apparent even to his young mind. The sheer volume of people calling out greetings and good wishes was overwhelming. He stayed close to Kate, occasionally peeking out the window before settling back against the seat. The excitement was still there, but tempered now with a new understanding of what it meant to be part of this extraordinary family. George, meanwhile, seemed to be absorbing every detail. His eyes moved constantly, taking in the careful organization of the crowds, the positioning of security personnel, and the intricate choreography that made such a massive public event possible. William recognized the look. It was the same expression he had worn during his first major royal engagements, the moment when duty transformed from an abstract concept to a tangible responsibility. "Look at the Tower Bridge," Kate said softly, drawing the children's attention to one of London's most famous landmarks. The bridge had been decorated with enormous banners featuring the royal coat of arms, and people lined both sides, waving from every available vantage point. The sight was spectacular, a perfect marriage of ancient tradition and contemporary celebration. Charlotte pressed her face to the window as they passed a group of children from various London schools. The youngsters had clearly been practicing. Their waves and cheers and their enthusiasm was infectious. Some held handmade signs with messages of support and celebration, their artwork colorful and heartfelt. One particular banner caught Charlotte's eye. Future Queen Charlotte written in rainbow letters by what appeared to be a classroom of 7-year-olds. The River Thames sparkled in the sunlight as they crossed Westminster Bridge. River boats packed with passengers moved slowly along the water, their occupants waving and taking photographs. The London Eye, though modern compared to the ancient buildings surrounding Westminster Abbey, had been illuminated in royal colors, creating a striking contrast against the clear morning sky. Street performers had been given special permission to entertain the crowds along certain sections of the route. Bagpipers in full Highland dress played traditional Scottish airs, their music adding a haunting beauty to the morning air. Morris dancers with bells on their costumes created pockets of movement and sound that delighted children in the crowd. Even traditional Punch and Judy shows had been set up at strategic points, bringing smiles to faces young and old. The security presence was expertly managed, visible enough to provide reassurance, but not so overwhelming as to create anxiety. Mounted police officers on magnificent horses provided crowd control with grace and style, their presence adding to the ceremonial atmosphere rather than detracting from it. Police dogs walked calmly with their handlers, and even these working animals seemed to sense the special nature of the day. As they approached Parliament Square, the density of international media became apparent. Television crews from dozens of countries had positioned themselves at key points, their cameras tracking the royal convoy's progress. Reporters spoke animatedly into microphones in languages from around the world, describing the scene to audiences who had risen early or stayed up late to witness this historic moment. The architecture of Westminster created a stunning frame for the procession. The Gothic spires of Parliament, the clock tower housing Big Ben, and the ancient stones of Westminster Abbey formed a backdrop that spoke of centuries of British history. These buildings had witnessed the coronations of monarchs stretching back nearly 1,000 years, and today they would witness another chapter in that continuing story. Kate noticed a group of military veterans, their medals gleaming on their chests, standing at attention as the convoy passed. Many were elderly, their service dating back to conflicts from decades past, but their pride was unmistakable. William, seeing them as well, nodded respectfully, a gesture that was captured by photographers and would later appear in newspapers around the world. The children's behavior throughout the journey had been exemplary, but the strain of maintaining royal composure was beginning to show. George's formal posture had relaxed slightly, and Charlotte was fidgeting with her gloves. Louis remarkably had fallen briefly asleep against Kate's shoulder, the early morning and excitement finally catching up with him. "Nearly there now," William said quietly, and the family prepared for the final phase of their journey. Westminster Abbey was visible now, its twin towers rising majestically above the surrounding buildings. The sight of their destination seemed to refocus everyone's attention on the ceremony ahead. The crowds around the Abbey were the most densely packed of the entire route. People stood shoulder to shoulder behind barriers, many having claimed their spots before dawn. The noise level was extraordinary. Cheers, applause, and calls of "God Save the King" created a wall of sound that penetrated even the insulated interior of their vehicle. Television screens had been erected at various points for those too far from the Abbey to see the actual arrival, and these screens were surrounded by additional crowds who cheered as if they were watching live theater. The atmosphere was festive, celebratory, and uniquely British in its combination of formality and genuine warmth. The final approach to Westminster Abbey was nothing short of magnificent. The ancient building, which had stood as the coronation church of English and British monarchs for nearly 1,000 years, rose before them like a stone cathedral of dreams. Its Gothic architecture reached toward the heavens, while its foundation remained firmly planted in centuries of royal tradition. The convoy slowed as they navigated the final security checkpoints, each one invisible to the public but essential. For the safety of the royal family, Kate could feel her heartbeat quickening, not from nerves but from the sheer magnitude of the moment. This was where she would witness history being made, where her husband would play a crucial role in his father's coronation, and where her children would take another step toward understanding their future roles. Around the Abbey, temporary structures had been erected to accommodate the thousands of distinguished guests. World leaders, heads of state, representatives from Commonwealth, nations and members of the nobility from across Europe had gathered for this ceremony. The sight of so many international flags and the sound of multiple languages created an atmosphere of global celebration. Louis stirred from his brief nap, immediately alert as the vehicle came to a complete stop. Through the windows, he could see the red carpet that had been rolled out for their arrival, flanked by guardsmen in their distinctive uniforms. Their tall bearskin hats and scarlet tunics created a corridor of military precision that would guide the family from their car to the Abbey entrance. "Remember what we practiced," William said gently to his children, but his tone carried affection rather than anxiety. The months of preparation had been thorough, and he had complete confidence in his family's ability to handle this moment with grace and dignity. The door of their vehicle was opened by a senior equerry, and William stepped out first, immediately, straightening to his full height. The roar from the crowd was instantaneous and overwhelming. Thousands of people who had waited hours for this moment erupted in cheers, applause, and calls of support. Cameras clicked rapidly from the designated media area, capturing every second of the arrival. Kate emerged next, and the crowd's reaction intensified. Her dress caught the light beautifully, the intricate embroidery work visible even from a distance. The sapphire tiara on her head sparkled brilliantly, creating small rainbows of light that seemed to dance around her. She moved with the poise that had made her one of the most photographed women in the world, yet maintained the warmth and accessibility that had endeared her to the British public. George followed his parents, his young face serious, but composed. The weight of his future responsibilities was evident in his careful movements and respectful demeanor. Yet he was still a child, and a small smile crossed his face as he heard someone in the crowd call out his name with obvious affection. Charlotte stepped out with characteristic confidence, her blue dress perfectly complementing her mother's ensemble. She had inherited her great-grandmother's natural ability to work a crowd, offering small waves and genuine smiles that delighted the spectators. Her presence seemed to remind everyone that the monarchy was not just about tradition and ceremony, but about family and continuity. Finally, Louis emerged, and the crowd's reaction became noticeably warmer and more personal. His natural enthusiasm was impossible to contain completely, and his excited expression as he took in the grandeur around him made even the most formal observers smile. He stayed close to his parents but was clearly amazed by everything he was seeing. The family began their walk along the red carpet, flanked by the household cavalry and greeted by senior clergy from Westminster Abbey. The Archbishop of Canterbury waited at the entrance, his ceremonial robes magnificent in gold and white, his presence lending additional gravitas to an already extraordinary moment. As they walked, Kate noticed the intricate details that had been prepared for their arrival. Rose petals had been scattered along the carpet, their fragrance mixing with the incense that drifted from the Abbey's interior. The ancient stones of the building seemed to glow in the morning light, and the stained glass windows cast patterns of colored light across the entrance. The sound of the Abbey's bells began to ring out across London, their peals announcing to the entire city that the royal family had arrived. The bells of Westminster had rung for coronations, royal weddings, and state occasions for centuries, and their music connected this moment to all the history that had come before. Inside the Abbey, the congregation rose as one as the royal family approached the entrance. 2,000 guests, representing every corner of the Commonwealth and beyond, stood in respect and anticipation. The sight was breathtaking. Row upon row of people in their finest attire, military uniforms gleaming with medals, diplomatic dress from dozens of nations, and the colorful robes of academic and religious institutions. The children handled the transition from bright outdoor sunlight to the Abbey's more subdued interior lighting with remarkable composure. The temperature inside was noticeably cooler, and the acoustics were entirely different from anywhere they had been before. Every footstep seemed to echo. Every whispered word carried clearly through the ancient space. William took a moment to survey the congregation, recognizing faces from around the world. Prime ministers and presidents sat alongside princes and peers, creating a gathering that represented the modern Commonwealth in all its diversity. The sight reinforced the global significance of what they were about to witness. Kate helped adjust Louis's collar one final time, a small maternal gesture that humanized the grand formality of the occasion. Charlotte straightened her shoulders, clearly understanding that they were now fully in the public eye, while George prepared himself for the long ceremony ahead. The organ began to play, its magnificent sound filling every corner of the abbey, and signaling that the ceremony was about to begin in earnest. The royal family took their designated places, and Kate felt a profound sense of privilege to be witnessing this moment in British history alongside her husband and children. Inside Westminster Abbey. The interior of Westminster Abbey was transformed into something beyond magnificent for the coronation ceremony. Ancient stone columns soared toward vaulted ceilings that seemed to touch the heavens themselves, while thousands of flowers and carefully arranged displays added color and life to the medieval architecture. The scent of roses, lilies, and other blooms from across the Commonwealth created an atmosphere that was both reverent and celebratory. Kate settled into her designated seat with the children, each of them taking a moment to absorb the grandeur surrounding them. The Abbey's acoustics meant that every sound, from the rustle of silk dresses to the quiet conversations of distinguished guests, seemed amplified and important. Louis, who had been remarkably well behaved throughout the morning, sat between his parents, his eyes wide with wonder at the spectacle unfolding around him. The congregation represented a living map of the modern world. In the front rows sat members of European royal families, their tiaras and ceremonial orders creating a glittering display of international aristocracy. Behind them, prime ministers and presidents from Commonwealth nations wore their finest formal attire, while representatives from institutions across Britain filled the remaining seats in carefully choreographed arrangements. George studied the ceremony program with serious attention, following along as various elements of the ancient ritual began to unfold. The weight of tradition was palpable in every gesture, every musical selection, and every spoken word. This was the same ceremony, with only minor modifications, that had crowned British monarchs for nearly 1,000 years. Charlotte was fascinated by the choir, whose pure voices filled the abbey with music that seemed to transform the very air around them. The choir boys, not much older than George, sang with professional precision while wearing traditional robes that connected them to centuries of musical tradition. Their performance was flawless, each note carefully placed and beautifully sustained. The processional began with representatives from various orders of chivalry, their colorful robes and ancient regalia creating a moving tapestry of British honors and traditions. Knights of the Garter walked alongside members of the Order of the Bath, while representatives from Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland added their own distinctive ceremonial dress to the magnificent procession. William watched with particular attention as the great officers of state began their ceremonial roles. The Earl Marshal, the Lord Great Chamberlain, and other ancient positions that existed nowhere else in the modern world, carried out duties that had been prescribed centuries earlier. The continuity was remarkable. In an age of constant change, this ceremony provided a direct connection to Britain's medieval past. The crown jewels, when they appeared in the procession, created a collective intake of breath from the congregation. The imperial state crown, the orb, the scepter, and other regalia caught the light from hundreds of candles and created dancing reflections on the abbey's ancient walls. Each piece represented not just incredible craftsmanship, but centuries of royal history and tradition. Kate noticed how the children were handling the length and formality of the ceremony. George remained attentive and engaged, clearly understanding the historical significance of what he was witnessing. Charlotte alternated between fascination with the music and careful observation of the other guests, particularly enjoying the variety of traditional dress from different Commonwealth nations. Louis, despite his young age, seemed to understand that this was a special occasion requiring his best behavior. He whispered occasional questions to Kate, who answered quietly without disturbing those around them. His natural curiosity about the ceremony was evident, but he managed to contain his usual exuberance out of respect for the solemnity of the occasion. The Archbishop of Canterbury's voice filled the abbey as ancient words of coronation were spoken, with the same gravity and reverence that had characterized similar moments stretching back through British history. The Latin phrases, the biblical references, and the ceremonial responses created a rhythm that was both timeless and deeply moving. The moment of actual crowning approached, and the entire abbey seemed to hold its breath. 2,000 guests, millions watching around the world, and centuries of tradition converged in this single, transformative instant. The weight of history was almost tangible, and even the youngest members of the congregation seemed to understand that they were witnessing something extraordinary. When the crown was finally placed, the abbey erupted in a carefully orchestrated, but genuinely enthusiastic response. "God Save the King" rang out from 2,000 voices, while the organ provided magnificent accompaniment. The sound was overwhelming, beautiful, and deeply emotional all at once. Louis clapped enthusiastically, his natural joy adding a touch of pure happiness to the solemnity of the moment. Charlotte smiled broadly, clearly proud to be part of this historic occasion, while George maintained his dignified composure, but with obvious satisfaction at having witnessed such an important event. The final processional began, with the newly crowned monarch leading the way out of the abbey. The crown jewels caught the light differently now, somehow more brilliant and significant than when they had entered. The transformation was complete, and everyone present understood that they had witnessed a moment that would be remembered and discussed for generations. As the ceremony concluded and the congregation began to file out in carefully prescribed order, Kate felt a profound sense of gratitude for having shared this experience with her family. The children had conducted themselves beautifully. William had played his ceremonial role with dignity and precision, and together they had been part of something truly historic. The sound of bells began again, this time in full celebratory peal, announcing to all of London that the coronation was complete. The music filled the abbey and spilled out into the streets where thousands of people waited to continue the celebration. The emergence from Westminster Abbey into the bright afternoon sunlight felt like stepping into a different world entirely. The ceremony had lasted nearly 3 hours, and during that time, London itself seemed to have transformed. The crowds that had gathered in the morning had grown even larger, and their energy was now celebratory rather than anticipatory. Kate blinked in the sudden brightness, her eyes adjusting from the abbey's candlelit interior to the brilliant sunshine that bathed the ancient stones in golden light. The children, who had maintained perfect behavior throughout the long ceremony, now showed signs of both relief and renewed excitement as they realized their formal duties were complete. The royal convoy waited exactly where they had left it, but the scene around it had changed dramatically. Rose petals and confetti scattered by well-wishers created a colorful carpet along the path to their vehicle. Street musicians played celebratory tunes, and the air was filled with the sounds of joy and festivity that only a successful royal ceremony could generate. Louis, who had been remarkably restrained during the service, practically bounced with enthusiasm as they walked toward their car. "Did you see all the shiny things?" he asked Kate, his voice full of wonder, and the singing was so loud. His innocent observations brought smiles to the faces of everyone within earshot, including the usually serious security personnel. George walked with the measured pace he had practiced for months, but Kate could see the satisfaction in his expression. He had successfully completed his first major state ceremony, and the pride he felt was evident despite his attempts to maintain royal composure. "The music was beautiful, wasn't it, Mama?" he said quietly, showing that he had absorbed far more of the ceremony than might be expected from someone his age. Charlotte, ever the performer, waved enthusiastically to the crowds as they made their way to the waiting convoy. Her natural charisma was on full display, and the spectators responded with obvious delight. Several people in the crowd called out her name specifically, and she seemed to glow with the positive attention. As they settled back into their vehicle for the return journey, the atmosphere was noticeably different from their morning departure. The tension of anticipation had been replaced by the satisfaction of a ceremony well executed. William helped Kate arrange her dress to prevent wrinkles, while she ensured that the children's formal attire remained presentable for the continued public appearances ahead. The route back through London revealed a city in full celebration, Street parties had spontaneously developed in locations where the crowds had gathered to watch the ceremony on large screens. Tables laden with traditional British fare appeared on every corner, and impromptu dancing had broken out in several locations. The sight was heartwarming, a genuine expression of public joy and national pride. The children pressed their faces to the windows, amazed by the transformation. Where they had seen formal, organized crowds in the morning, they now witnessed organic celebration. Children ran alongside their convoy for short distances, waving flags and calling out greetings. Elderly couples danced to music from portable speakers, and teenagers took countless selfies with the royal cars in the background. Kate noticed a group of military families who had gathered outside a local community center, their children dressed in miniature versions of military uniforms. The sight reminded her of the broader significance of the day. This wasn't just about royal ceremony, but about the institutions and traditions that connected millions of people across the Commonwealth. As they traveled through different neighborhoods, the diversity of celebration became apparent. In areas with large immigrant populations, the British flags were joined by the colors of dozens of other nations, creating a visual representation of modern multicultural Britain. Traditional music from various cultures mixed with British anthems, producing a soundtrack that was uniquely contemporary while honoring the historic nature of the day. Louis had finally succumbed to exhaustion and was dozing against William's shoulder. His small body relaxed after the excitement and formality of the morning. His peaceful sleep was a reminder that despite all the ceremony and protocol, they remained fundamentally a family caring for their children. The approach to their residence was lined with local residents who had gathered to welcome them home. These were their neighbors in the truest sense, people who lived in their community and had watched the ceremony on television before coming out to greet the family's return. Their presence felt personal and heartwarming after hours of public ceremony. As the convoy pulled up to their entrance, Kate felt a profound sense of completion. They had successfully navigated one of the most important days in recent British history. Their children had conducted themselves beautifully, and they had played their parts in continuing a tradition that stretched back nearly a millennium. The staff who had helped them prepare that morning were waiting to assist with their return, their faces showing obvious pride and satisfaction at how well the day had proceeded. The transformation back from public royalty to private family would be gradual, but the first step was simply getting everyone safely home. George stirred Louis gently awake as they prepared to leave the vehicle. "We're home," he said softly, and something in his tone suggested that he understood home meant both their physical residence and their place within the continuing story of the British monarchy. Charlotte smoothed her dress one final time as they prepared to step out for the waiting photographers who would document their return, but her smile was no longer the carefully practiced expression of the morning. It was the genuine happiness of a child who had successfully participated in something truly special. As they walked toward their entrance, Kate reflected on the remarkable journey they had just completed. From the quiet family breakfast that morning, to the grandeur of Westminster Abbey, and back to the warmth of their community welcome, it had been a day that perfectly captured the unique position of the modern British royal family, formal yet accessible, traditional yet contemporary, public yet fundamentally personal.